Hi everyone, my name is Colby Brown. I'm a Sony artisan and I'm incredibly excited to be here at the Sony Creative Space teaching you this class called Adapt and Evolve Business Strategies for an Ever-Changing World. Now, I've been in this industry for over 13 years. I've worked for National Geographic. I've started a few of my own companies over the years. And because of all that, I really enjoy talking about business and business strategies. And I think it's a topic that a lot of photographers in this industry tend to avoid or definitely neglect. And I think if 2020 has taught us anything, it is that now more than ever, we need to make sure that we're being as creative as possible, making sure that we are kind of pushing boundaries and trying to find new ways in order to survive during the challenging times we find ourselves in. Now, with all that said, there are a lot of things I'd like to cover today, and I only have about 30 minutes for this recorded session before we do our Q&A. So please be sure to take some notes and let me know in the Q&A session after this, when we do that live, for anything that you want me to expand upon. Now, with that said, let's go ahead and jump right in and get started. Now, I think the first question we have to ask ourselves is 2020 really that unique to the photo industry? Now, of course, the pandemic side of things is unique. We can't travel internationally very easily. There's restrictions for traveling within the US, at least within some states. And of course, we can't easily, get in close contact with each other, which has directly affected, events and sports photographers, even portrait and wedding photographers as well. And so in that regard, yes, that is different. But the truth is that over the last couple decades, we've also experienced a handful of both internal and external variables that has caused massive shakeups within our industry. And it's caused a lot of business closings, but also a lot of opportunities. And there's a lot of lessons that we can learn. So for the first portion of this class, let's do a little bit of a dive into a few of the historical challenges that our industry has faced and kind of what we can kind of extrapolate or pull out from that. Now, I think the first thing that we should talk about in terms of the history and the shift or change that happened within the photography industry is we need to talk about the switch over from digital or from film to digital. And I think that in and of itself was a massive shakeup of our industry. You had a lot of photographers that were part of the old guard that began to struggle with the new technology and the change of technology, making it more accessible to a lot of other people, really changed the dynamics of just how many people were in the industry to begin with, but also really how to shoot and photograph out in the world. If you've been learning how to shoot film photography for years and all of a sudden you had to then, jump into the digital space and relearn it, even though you knew obviously the core concepts, I think, there were a lot of people that struggled with that transition. And this was a technological change, as I mentioned. So it's certainly different than what we went through before. But regardless, it required people to learn new techniques, to learn new skills, to learn new technology. And out of that challenge, out of those, the struggle that happened for many people that were already in the industry, it created more opportunities for people just getting into it. And it's that idea of a challenging situation presenting opportunities as something that's going to be a common thread throughout this class, and something that I certainly hope you take away from after this class, after you've done watching this and we've had our Q&A session and everything. So definitely take note of what's happening with each of these different events that we're talking about. Now, the next challenging moment I want to talk about happens to come down to stock photography. Now, stock photography is essentially the idea that photographers would sell their images to a large stock firm or stock agency, and those agencies would then sell and license those images to companies for marketing or ad purchasing purposes. And essentially what would happen is that back in the day, if you had a large stock portfolio and you were represented by Getty or something like that, Corbis, there were not that many people in that space. And so you were able to dominate that space, giving you the opportunity to sell and license images to companies for tens of thousands of dollars. And there are many photographers that I knew back in that time that were making well into the six figures because they had a large stock portfolio and companies were eating it up. But what happened is that the stock industry changed almost overnight because you had these large stock firms start buying out other firms that weren't as big as them. And then they started buying out the smaller firms as well, and essentially created a situation where what you have now, which is considered micro stock. So instead of licensing an image for $10,000 or $15,000, People can now go on, you and I could jump into some of these stock agencies and license an image for $5 or $10. And so what happened is it drastically cut photographers' income that were solely focused on this idea of stock photography almost overnight. If you went from six figures to all of a sudden making 10 or 15 or $20,000 a year, that's a significant cut in your income. The lesson that I pull out of this particular event is simply the notion that you can't or shouldn't put all of your eggs in one basket. If you're making a lot of money doing one thing, all it takes is a giant disruption or even a mid-level disruption in order to drastically change the amount of revenue you're generating in a given year. So, the idea of diversification is another theme that we're going to talk about much more detail later on in today's class. So the third event that I want to talk about is something that maybe correlate a little bit more to what's happening right now in the pandemic, and that's the 2008-2009 financial crisis. So while that certainly didn't involve a pandemic, it did have drastic ramifications for economies all over the world. And what happens when economies start to go down or make less money or feel less stable is that companies tend to spend less money, people tend to spend less money. You're not going to go out and splurge on a very expensive photographer for a wedding example back in 2008, 2009, because you might not know when your next paycheck was coming from, or if all your investments were in stock, or you couldn't pay your rent or your mortgage because of the housing crisis. All those different variables came into play. And that's something that we're experiencing right now. I think overall, it's safe to say that the U.S. economy is on a downturn currently. Trajectory, we certainly can rebound or will be rebounding at some point. But around the world, we're seeing budgets get cut. We're seeing people get laid off. And we're seeing a similar amount of uncertainty that we have to figure out ways to cope with. And so the interesting thing about 2008 and 2009 for me personally is that I had started my company 4 or 5 years before that. So back in 2006, 2005, 2006, when I started my first photography company. And so when I was observing what was happening in 2008 and 2009, it was really incredible because out of all of the challenges and the hardships that I saw for a lot of people, I also saw a lot of ingenuity. I saw a lot of creativity. I saw a lot of people that had normal jobs that were forced to try new things, to jump into entrepreneurship because they had lost their jobs or their stable income. And so out of 2008, 2009, as hard as it was, I saw a resurgence in entrepreneurism, in people creating new trends and forging new pathways that didn't exist before. We saw a lot of people starting to jump in and do amazing things with time lapse, for example, that wasn't really done all that much before then. Doing new and creative things with things like hyperlapses and leveraging social media in different ways to create new niches. So the lesson I get from 2008 and 2009 is that the opportunities that presented themselves for those that were willing to adapt and that could evolve on the fly and that were creative enough in order to try these new things that hadn't been either tried before or at least not successfully, provided an opportunity to not only build a brand and build a company, but also make a good amount of money during those challenging times as well. So if you find yourself, again, doing the same things over and over again and you're hitting a wall, such as what we're experiencing right now in the industry, it's time to adapt and evolve. And, since it's the title of this class, you're going to again see that theme that we kind of expand upon throughout the rest of the 30 minutes that we have here together. So the first one that I have is finding a solution to a client's problem. Now, this sounds pretty basic, but in reality, it is business 101. You need to be a problem solver if you are in the business of running a business, if you're an entrepreneur. Since the beginning of time, if you could find someone that had a problem and you were able to provide a solution, then there are ways that you could monetize that. And so maybe your client's problem is that they need portraits of themselves, or maybe your client's problem is that they need a digital campaign to show off their latest laptop or phone, or maybe it is a travel destination that needs to market their location. Either way, all of these different kinds of clients have problems. And if you have the ability to solve them, then you have the ability to potentially make a living doing photography for business. Now, number two is thinking 10 steps ahead. So I find that a lot of photographers tend to focus on the here and the now. And I get it. A lot of the time we're out there in the field, we're focusing on our camera, we're shooting the moment, we're focusing on our subject. But when it comes to business, those that I find that are most successful in this industry are the ones that are not focusing on short-term gain. They're thinking of long-term strategy. So, for example, when you're out there in the field, or I guess let's come back to 2020, you're thinking of what's happening to you right now. That's important. I get that we have, mortgage or rent to pay. You have to put food on the table. I get all these things. But at the same time, you should be attempting to think of what's happening 2 weeks down the line, a couple months down the line, what's happening next year. And you should build into your strategy, your business strategy, which we'll talk about later, this idea of setting goals for yourself and a direction for you to head towards so that you can, achieve those goals and so that you have a direction. If you're wandering aimlessly within an industry, you have to be incredibly lucky in order to find success. It takes the ability to think towards the future of where you want to be and occasionally, take steps backwards in order to figure out where do you want to be, where are you now, and how do you get there. So thinking 10 steps ahead is super important when it comes to, building out a more robust plan and putting it into action rather than just getting lucky and trying to get job to job to job. It's a big differentiator for me when I look at those, again, that are most successful in this industry. The third is going to be diversification. Now, diversification is not just in the different types of clients that you have, and it's not just in, the type of work that you do. It's in what you're able to create. It's in pretty much all the different facets of the different, variables within your business. A great example of this is if you looked at the photo industry 10 years ago and you had a client that was reaching out for a either content campaign or a marketing piece or newspaper project, you would typically have a photographer hired, you would have a writer that was hired, and if there was video aspects of the project, you'd have a videographer hired, a cinematographer. Nowadays, what's happening is that a lot of clients are looking for someone that can do all three. And so if you can be a photographer that begins to offer your clients more, you have more ability to rise above your competition. You have more ability in order to charge higher prices. You have more ability in order to find new clients because you have this, because you're more multifaceted. So it's super important to think about diversification, not just in revenue streams, not just in clients, but in the types of services and products that you are capable of creating so that you can offer people more and therefore make more money and therefore find more success. Now, number 4 is the ability to adapt and evolve when necessary. And again, this is straightforward because this is the name of this class. But I think if you have the ability to think on your feet, you have the ability to adjust quickly, then you will have a higher chance of surviving a challenging time such as 2020. I think if you think about the largest companies that are out there, they tend to do like this one thing, FedEx delivers packages. So if there was a drastic, hit towards the transit industry, for example, they're going to be extremely hit hard. You are not as big as FedEx. So as a smaller entity, as a smaller company, as a smaller LLC, whatever you may be, you have the potential to be able to shift and change on the fly, to try new things, to not repeat the same mistakes and just keep hitting your head against the wall when it comes to, trying to, have people purchase weddings from you as a service that you offer, and whatever you keep doing, and keep doing, and then 2020 hits, and then all of a sudden no one's buying, and you don't do anything, no one's gonna, no one's gonna hire you for those weddings. But if you can shift and change and apply your focus to other genres that might be tangentially connected to what you're doing, you might be able to find success. And if you do it quickly, and if you do it before your competition does it, again, you're going to find that opportunity. So being able to adapt and evolve in a quick manner to kind of pivot and try new things is a very important tenet when it comes to, core principles of business. So our 5th and final one is that every job should lead to another job. So what do I mean by that? I mean that every time you find success, every time you get hired to do something, the success of that job, the content coming out of that job, and the ability that you've done the job well should lead to you finding more work. So a easy example for this is something that relates to myself. Let's say I teach a workshop down in Brazil and I bring clients down there to photograph jaguars in the Pantanal region. Now I'm going to get paid to go down there to lead that workshop. At the same time, the content that comes out of that trip, I might use to license to other companies. And then I might also use that same content to share onto social media to hopefully get more clients or get hired for other different types of marketing campaigns. And then I might use that same content and create a video tutorial on how to process images. And so what I've done is I've taken the content and all the energy that I put into one successful job, and hopefully that has now led to 5 or 6 other potential jobs down the line as well. So the same thing could be said for you guys out there. Again, if you're shooting a wedding, for example, or a portrait session, or an event or a sport or whatever it is, once you've completed that job, you've hopefully made your clients happy. You then can take that content and hopefully, maybe get testimonials to help lead to other jobs. Then maybe you can use that content to show other people what type of portraits you offer people, or maybe share some behind the scenes stuff to show what your personality's like. Regardless, you should take any success that you find in the industry, extrapolate it, and then try to find new ways in order to use that content, that energy, that success, that positivity to lead to future jobs down the line. For me, this is probably one of the biggest lessons that I learned over the course of my career, is that if I could take the energy, if I could take the quality of work, if I could take the skill sets that I've developed on a job and trying to find ways in order to leverage that in order to get more work, I ended up not only finding more success, I made sure to magnify or to multiply the amount of energy and effort I put into any work that I did, because I knew that it was going to lead to more successes down the line. So try not to do just one-off campaigns or think of projects as just short-term things. Think more long-term. Think how you can leverage the successes, the clients that you've had in order to hopefully lead to new clients down the road. Now, I certainly don't want to make this course all about myself. That would be extremely boring. So let's go ahead and spend just a little bit of time talking about 2 other Sony photographers that are doing pretty exceptional work that we can hopefully pull some lessons from and that you guys can relate to depending on where you're at in your own journey. So the first one I want to talk about is Erin Outdoors. It's Erin Sullivan. She's a Sony Alpha Collective member. She's a good friend of mine. I've traveled to Namibia with her. I've traveled to Myanmar. I've traveled to Australia. We're good friends, and I was completely blown away by the success that she's had here in 2020, given all the challenges that we have all experienced. Now, Erin is just like myself. She's a travel photographer, so she spends a lot of time traveling around the world, working on different projects and doing different things. And for her, as of March, she was on lockdown. She wasn't able to travel. Even to this day, as Americans, we can't travel to a lot of countries around the world because of what's happening with COVID. And so instead of just giving up and hitting a creative roadblock and just kind of, either going into a depression or just taking a break, a year off work, she decided to use her creativity to create pretty amazing scenes using miniatures and household items to recreate some of the adventures and the experiences that she's had around the world. And when you look at these images and you look at what she's been able to create, it's truly aspirational and inspirational. And you can see here in this image, you have, behind the scenes on the right, and this is, the giant pumpkin patch. And she has a pumpkin with some little miniature pumpkin set up on her bed, just on one of her jackets, actually. You see the setup with her camera. And on the left, you see the actual image with these 2 miniatures feeling like they're exploring this kind of miniature fantasy land. And what's truly amazing about this is that, Erin's social media footprint was decent. A year ago, she would have, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 interactions on the different posts that she would put out there. But when she started doing this, she just blew up. And all of a sudden she was getting interviewed by magazines and newspapers, online publications, and therefore her account began to blow up. And all of a sudden, instead of getting 1,000 or 2,000 interactions per post, she was getting 12,000, 15,000, 20,000. And so the success that she's been able to pull off in 2020 has built around this idea of brand building. And she's built this large platform using Instagram and using her creativity to create these really unique scenes that people really need to experience in this challenging year where they couldn't travel or we were all on lockdown back in April and May. And, her success out of that has been amazing to see. But it's not just been the idea, or I guess I should say that, Instagram doesn't work like YouTube does. Like YouTube, essentially, if you create content and you get enough views, you can make money by advertising. That's not how Instagram works. So just by having Erin increase her social media footprint on Instagram, it hasn't really allowed her to make any direct money specifically from Instagram. But what it did is it built up her brand enough where other companies began to reach out to her to create miniature scenes for their companies to essentially market their different products or services. And then at the same time, she now has this large platform that she can then use in order to push other products and services that she's always done that she might not have got the same amount of eyeballs on before. Now all of a sudden she has this large platform. And all of this is because she had this passion project, this idea that she wanted to create, not to make money, mostly out of, expanding her creativity and keeping the creativity and the ingenuity flowing. And then out of it, she found this amazing success. And now moving forward, she has this large platform that she can use in order to find new clients that she can then use to push out when she has a workshop to sell or when she, is doing a different campaign for different things that don't involve miniatures. But now she has that ability and she didn't have it before. And this is all thanks to COVID, to her creativity, to her ability to adapt and evolve on the fly and to use that creativity to positive use when in a challenging situation. Now, the next person I want to talk about is Omer Khan. Now, Omer is someone that I've met in Vegas myself. We've been connected on social media for a long time, and I've really been blown away by the work that he's been doing this year as well. Now, he's a portrait photographer. He also shoots weddings. He also dabbles quite a bit in sports photography in a year that we can actually, go to sports events. He shot a lot for the NBA, NHL, and stuff like that in Vegas. But regardless, the success that he's found this year has been tied a bit more towards his portrait and some of his wedding work as of late. And I was really blown away by just how busy Omer has been in 2020, given that the challenges for portrait and wedding photographers and what that side of the industry has faced this year. And so what he's been able to do throughout the course of this summer is been able to focus this idea on the experience. He sells the idea of the experience of going out and doing a portrait session. Now, for a lot of people, COVID has hit us hard, whether it's we've lost jobs, whether it's just been on lockdown or we couldn't travel. And so he focused his attention on selling this idea of, let's get away of that. Let's get ourselves devoid of COVID. Let's get dressed up. Let's go take some, amazing pictures out in nature. And he's been selling this idea of experiential packages to his clients that they've loved because it takes them out of their own reality and gives them the opportunity to, be someone else for a moment, to try new things, to get away from all the challenges that COVID has been facing for all of us. And through that, he's found quite a bit of success over the last, 5-6 months. Omer told me that, every single day this summer leading up until today, he is booking about 1 to 2 people per day. Now, I don't know what other portrait photographers or what you guys are doing out there, but to me, that's pretty incredible that he is constantly busy. He is working all the time. He is making good money and he's offering new products and services that he didn't have to before, but he's been able to find success doing it with this idea of kind of selling the idea of the experience of getting away from COVID and trying new and different things. Now, in addition to that, he has also been a big proponent of using social media and word of mouth in order to build up more of his following. Now, when he looks back, he's actually only paid for one Facebook ad back in March. And since then, everything has been about using the different features that each of the different platforms have in order to build things up more and more for not only his brand and his social imprint, but also where he's getting a lot of his clients. For him, he takes most of his focus is going to be on Instagram feed posts. He also does Instagram stories, Instagram TV videos, and then he's found quite a bit of success using the Instagram Reels, saying that he's getting almost 5 times the amount of interaction on Reels than he is on his normal Instagram stories. But he tries to quiz his clients every time they call him and reach out to him to schedule these portrait sessions. And I'd say 80, 90% of the time, he has told me that all of this is coming from social media. So he's leveraging this idea of the experience and using social media in order to bring other people along on these portrait sessions to show other people what this experience is like. He likes to share behind the scenes stuff. He likes to let people know exactly what he's trying to offer. And in turn, he's focusing so much of that attention on building up his local portfolio and reaching out to people that are local to him around Vegas. And in turn has found, again, quite a bit of success in that process. Now, in addition to that, he has also interwoven his idea of using drones, specifically because it allows him to do something different than a lot of his competition isn't doing. And so using drones for a portrait session might sound a bit interesting or different or out of left field for some of you, but he looked at his competition, very few people were doing it, and now he has the ability to bring his drone out and then use it as he's shooting other things, as he's doing photos and videos for his clients, and then being able to take these aerial photos that, again, offer his clients something new and something different. So a lot of the lessons that I pulled out of Omar's story for 2020 is that he has used his creativity and his ability to not only look at his competition, but to figure out what opportunities were available to him in order to create new packages to sell his clients. He found out that his clients had new problems rather than just before just wanting a portrait session. They were also bored with life. They were also, sick of the challenges of COVID and wanted a break, even if it was just for a few hours. So he's been able to put these packages together and really allow his clients to take a break of reality. And in turn, he's staying busier than ever in 2020, which is pretty amazing. So now that we've gone over all that, what are the different steps that you can do? We've talked about a bunch of different lessons from my own case studies, from case studies of 2020, and a little bit about the history. But let's add upon that just a little bit to see what are things that you can do to hopefully increase your chances of finding success in 2020 when it comes to the business of photography. So first and foremost, the number one thing is to get creative about finding new clients. We've talked about that quite a bit. Whether you're looking for new problems that your clients are having, like Omer has, whether you're creating new opportunities to find new clients, like Erin has, or whether you're looking at the industry as a whole, like I did back in 2009, and saying, hey, there's an opportunity if I start doing this. If you can try to find ways in order to find new clients, you will find success when it comes to the business side of photography. Again, I like to focus on this idea of problem solving. So instead of just saying, I need to find new clients, try to think of it more pragmatically. Think about it in terms of what are the challenges facing people right now, or at least the people that you want to work with, and then work backwards and try to figure out how can you solve those problems for these new clients, and then hopefully you'll get hired for them. Now, the next one is to write out a business plan. This is number 2. Now, a business plan is something that many of you probably have never thought of doing. Maybe you've never written one out to begin with. I don't have time in this particular session to show you exactly how it works, but if you do a Google search for a business plan template, you will find plenty of different options. And regardless, the idea of writing out something physical, I think, is not only a cathartic experience and therapeutic, but I think it also helps you think more proactively about where you are at as a company or a business or an entity and where you want to be. And so even just going through the motions of doing this, you might learn something about where your shortcomings are or what challenges you face or how you could try to overcome them. So write out a business plan. That's number 2. Now, our third takeaway is essentially the idea to look for opportunities. Now, this could be something that could be as simple as finding new clients, which we've already covered, but it could also be trying new technology, maybe getting into time-lapse work or learning how to edit videos or learning how to shoot videos if you haven't ever done that. You've only been a still photographer before. Regardless, there are plenty of opportunities out there for you to find ways at a local level, at a state level. I'm seeing a lot of creatives still finding work these days that are doing things that are different than what they have been doing. So your opportunities within this can be just reaching out to different clients. It could be to finding new problems to solve. You can use social platforms like LinkedIn in order to connect with the right kinds of people and to help you find new clients and new opportunities, because normally you don't know who to reach out and who to talk to in those situations. If you wanted to reach out to Sony to pitch them an idea, Using something like LinkedIn can help you figure out who is the right person to talk to before you begin cold pitching people ideas. So those are all ways in order to generate opportunities and things that you need to take into account when it comes to building a better business. Now, number 4 is to underpromise and overdeliver. So what do I mean by that? I think all too often, sometimes photographers try to overpromise and then they get so wrapped up in what they're trying to deliver that it doesn't end up equating out to what you had promised to deliver to your clients to begin with. Instead, I think it's a much more pragmatic approach to underpromise, to sit there and be much more realistic in what you're trying to deliver, and then to over-deliver to your clients. Now, this is something that Omer has done with some of his packages where he'd go out with his clients, have a specific package that his clients had bought into, and then when it came to delivery time, he would give them a couple different extras because he wanted to, help his word of mouth advertising. And so it was a great way where he had set realistic expectations, and he was able to leverage and use the content that he created and build this relationship of work with where hopefully not only he will get hired again to shoot these people's portraits a different time, but also those people were so happy with the work that he created and that he over-delivered, he was able to then use that in order to leverage to get more work down the line. So under-promise and over-deliver, that's number 4. Now, number 5 is to diversify your revenue streams. These are lessons that we learned from how stock photography happened back in the day, as well as a lot of the case studies that we talked about during the course of this class. If you can diversify your different revenue streams and spread things out so that all of your eggs aren't in one basket, you have more ability to weather the storms when things get challenging. When you have disruptions within your revenue stream, if you have 3 or 4 other ones that can pick up some of the slack for the one that was hit really heavily during an event like COVID, then you have the ability to pivot more easily and you have not as much of a significant loss when it comes to revenue streams being disrupted and things really getting turned upside down and your world becoming exponentially more challenging. So while you have the ability, you should, when you start writing out your business plan, when you start putting together these business strategies that we've talked about, you should look into that idea of diversifying, offering clients more, finding new different clients, but also trying to do different types of things so that if you are just a portrait photographer and that's all you do, you might want to think about trying to offer 3 or 4 other different opportunities so that hopefully none of those all get affected the same way, so that you can try to figure out ways to pivot to things that you already know so that you aren't also spending time during an event like 2020 where you have to learn something new and try to pivot and do something else. Instead, you've already put the groundwork in. You've put your time and energy in, and you know how to do these other different types of services or products that you can offer clients, and you don't have to spend that extra time. And instead, you just get a pivot and focus on revenue streams that you've already generated, you already have clients with, you already have done all the legwork for. So that's number 5, diversify your revenue streams. Now, that's all we have for today's recorded session for the Adapt and Evolve class. If you guys have questions, obviously we're going to have a Q&A session in just a few minutes. In addition, you guys are more than welcome to follow me on any of these different social media platforms or check out my website at www.colbybrownphotography.com. I also am on Instagram at Colby Brown Photography, as well as on Twitter and Facebook. If you guys are interested in workshops in 2021 and 2022, I also have plenty of opportunities for that all over the world. Once we get a handle on COVID and can do these things safely, I'd love to see you guys join me on one of my adventures to Brazil or India or Africa to, track down silverback gorillas or, explore temples, check out some amazing landscapes out there. So be sure to check those out on my website as well. And with all that said, let's go ahead and jump over and begin our Q&A session right now. Thanks again for watching.